Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is Nina Power, the author of One-Dimensional Woman and What Do Men Want? She's also somewhat of a commentator and writes for various magazines. In this conversation, we talk about her gradual conversion to Christianity, her take on modern-day politics and the way that we discuss politics and identify in and out of various different political leanings or positions. And overall, we just had a great time. We have spoken a couple times in the past, so this is a continuation of an ongoing friendship that we have, intellectual friendship. It's always great to have her on. You can find links to her work down there in the description. And if you enjoy this content, consider supporting it however you feel works for you. Without further ado, here is Nina Power.
Hello.
Hey, Nina.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm just checking to see my lipstick doesn't make me look like I'm mentally ill. Um,
That can work in your favor, you know.
it's fine. I don't want to look like a sort of mad cat lady too, there's like a fine line. How are you?
I am good. Yeah, just waiting for things to become clearer.
Ooh. Are you waiting on a revelation, a project, advance?
I don't know. There's this story that's kind of developing, but I don't know if it's just online bickering or if it actually has teeth or momentum to it. Are you off of Twitter now?
I have my old evil Twitter account because the one that I was using to research my book on men. It still exists, but I don't post. I just follow various people. But I don't write anything.
Where do you get your commentariat feeling of the zeitgeist?
Going outside.
Oh, okay. So you're very
No.
localized, yeah.
No, I mean no. Let's be realistic. So I'm on Substack, obviously, and I do follow the news. But I have to say, on X and in some group chats, but I have to say the Americanness of everything can get overwhelming. I mean, of course I appreciate we're an outpost of the empire, but.
Well, you're more honest than some. And you do have a red hat behind you.
Oh yes, but you know what? This actually says. I realise that it may be a slightly sort of silly move to have the red hat, but it actually says make art beautiful
Beautiful
again.
again.
And my friend Pierre had them made for his art gallery. But yes, I appreciate it's a sort of MAGA thing.
It
But we
works.
don't.
It works.
We don't have any
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah, no.
Like the whole American culture. What can you do? I have some powerful incense here that says "shut up" on it, and I have
Okay.
no idea why anyone would have any incense that says "shut up." But I just anyway, it's fine.
Who sent you that? Was that a
No,
gift?
I bought it from some strange sort of animism shop that sells weird charms.
Oh, cool. Are you going like Order of the Golden Dawn at
No.
this point in your life?
No, this is just a sun. I appreciate that. Like my necklaces, like freak people out. They came up in the trial as somehow like weird evidence of my bizarre occultism and so on. Despite the fact that I actually go to church, but
Yeah, well, yeah, but what kind of church? Like wicked church or?
no, like the most boring kind of Anglican,
Oh,
high church Christian,
yeah.
I'm not a Satanist. I just did the satanic hand thing.
You did this.
I know.
You just did the satanic hand thing.
Oh man,
You're
it's a
trapped in
semiotic.
symbolism.
It's a semiotic mess. I do think we are trapped in semiosis. I do think there is a thing called semiosis, which is like sign psychosis.
Apple or something like that.
Oh, what like seeing things everywhere, like
Yeah, like there's meaning. There's just meaning.
there's just meaning.
like a hyperabundance or an overabundance of meaning?
Well, there's signs everywhere, and I mean, Baudrillard makes this point, I guess, now about 30 years ago. But yeah, they're sort of signs without reference. You know, like
Mm,
we're just flooded with symbols everywhere, and if you have
yeah.
a kind of paranoid worldview, then you're
Mm,
trying to piece together a story about the whole. You know, and we all try
yeah.
to do that a little bit,
Yeah.
especially when we're tired or you know.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. I get. I am in America, so it's natural to me to be aware of American politics. It's not like culture shock or anything. But this
No.
particular election on the image level is amazing.
Yes.
There's just these pictures of this guy, Donald J. Trump. He was the president and he's running for president again. Do you know who I'm talking about? Some people call him the Orange Man. Orange Man. Anyways, his like he got kind of like shot or something, and
What are
his
you doing?
well, hold on. No, hold on. His immediate reaction was to stage the most epic photo op of all time. And it was
Yeah.
pure instinct from him. So it wasn't a staged thing, but he staged it at the same time. Like the showman and the show collided in that moment. And for me, I just saw like this bursting through of some sort of authentic masculine leadership in that moment. And amidst this constant news cycle where some leftist Redditor can set themselves on fire and everybody forgets his name in 2 days, right? But
Mm.
Trump keeps on punching through this wall.
Yeah, I mean, he's an icon. America is cinematic. I mean, it's the cinematic empire. It's the
Hmm.
outlaw, it's the cowboy, it's the kind of hero in the wilderness. And Trump is just a master of the icon, you know,
Hmm.
the image. He knows how to play it, like whether he's posing as a felon. I mean, he's, you know, he was really arrested, I assume.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
you all live in the theatrical make-believe world, but assume some of this is real. Like it's a real show trial, a real fake McDonald's photo op, a real, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, of course he deserves to win on the basis of image alone. You know, this is
Hmm.
how you win
Hmm.
a virtual election. I mean, they could literally steal it though, or they could
I,
do something weird. But
yeah. I don't know. I guess I shouldn't say anything if this. I don't want to get punished by YouTube by speculating beforehand. But I think it's kind of passe at this point that if they're gonna cheat, they're gonna cheat, and you can't really do anything about it.
no, I mean, I don't really think that. You know, I believe in free and fair elections, and I think America is the greatest democracy the world has ever seen.
Flawed democracy. We identify as a flawed democracy.
Really? Is that in your
Yeah.
constitution?
Well, what about you Brits? What's going on over there?
Oh,
There were some riots. The right
oh,
wing tried to stop the process of you losing your country and was stopped. Didn't they released a whole bunch of felons so they could stock the jails with dissidents? Didn't they do that?
just like in A Clockwork Orange, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, no, Britain is, what can we say? A kind of failed state.
Hmm.
It's a crumbling island off the coast of Europe, which we are no longer part of in some immaterial way. Yeah, I mean, I think every time there's been an election for like the past 15, 20 years, the thing that people have voted for example, like a immigration restriction, has not been followed through on. And in fact, it's been massively increased. So just at that basic level of, you know, you buy something and it's not what you wanted, and then you can't take it back. So yeah, I would say people are pretty upset. It's a very expensive country. It's a pretty depressing country. Not much of it works anymore. Like all the
Hmm.
infrastructure is broken. I mean, we had this kind of problem by being like the first to build an underground system, but like it's still the same one when there were like four people in London, and
Yeah.
now there are like 40 million. So, and it's the
Mm.
size of like a rat hole. And
Hmm.
so you can't really fit that number of people.
You
And it's
guys call it
all
the tube.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know, it feels a bit flat and dour, and Keir
Hmm.
Starmer is a former prosecutor, like Kamala Harris, and prosecutors really only see two types of people in the world, those who are in prison and those who are not yet in prison.
Oh
Uh
no! I thought you were gonna
and
say like defendants and whatever the other one,
no,
prosecutors or whatever.
no, prosecutors. So we have this kind of dour, unpleasant man without character who's a complete hypocrite. I mean, he's like the consummate leftist. It's like, it's okay when he does it because he's a good guy. And
Mm.
anyone else who does anything is like bad and evil because we live in this Manichaean universe in which there are only two kinds of people. And
Hmm.
yeah, anyway, so he put loads of people in prison for tweets and Facebook because, of course, we don't have the First Amendment or the Fourth, which is the one with guns. Anyway, we don't have guns or free speech.
Second.
The
Yeah.
second,
No, you
I don't
guys
want
have
this.
like knives, I guess,
Oh yeah, yeah, we have knives.
and
We have
pouty
forks.
faces, like
We have
sarcasm.
yeah, yeah, and just sort of like really a sense of humor that we're not allowed to express anymore in case someone gets offended. Because I am 70 years old and I'm a grumpy white grandfather, and
Hmm.
so yeah, so people went to prison for basically social media sins of, of course, some of the things people said were not very pleasant, and some of the things people did were not very pleasant, but they're massively asymmetrical prosecution and punishment, much as we saw in the riots in 2011.
Where does that
Um,
leave the dissidents? People,
well,
I don't want to call you a dissident, but you do have spicy takes from time to time. At least that's what the legal proceedings revealed to
well,
the public.
I mean, I don't think I do, but I mean, I don't know. I have some, of my little own mini prosecutors who are kind of insane and want to
Hmm.
ruin my life because they enjoy it or something. I don't know. It's like a game for rich people or something. Um, I
They
don't
hunt you
know.
for sport.
Yes, it's like fox hunting. Honestly, this is like the British mentality.
Oh, okay.
Um, so yeah, there's some crazy people who pretend not to have a sense of humor, and perhaps they don't have a sense of humor, but they don't seem to understand that other people do or
Hmm.
might.
Yeah.
Uh, and
Hmm.
yes, I was involved with a friend in a legal case for 6 years, which went on forever, and we tried to settle and mediate and do all this stuff, and it just wasn't possible because the other person refused to cede his fantasy that we were evil.
Mm. And you're not.
Uh,
Well, at
well,
least that's
I
what you
mean,
contend.
I no, I would say I'm evil, but I am
Hmm.
evil in the same way that like everyone is evil, you know? Like
Hmm.
and I think the people who are using this good person, bad person thing don't actually have the ontology or the metaphysics or the moral system or religious worldview to actually back up their claims that people are inherently good or bad. It's not operating at that level. So as a Christian, of course, I think that we are all sinners and we're all capable of sin, right?
Hmm.
And that we do commit sin all the time. And I would never for a second say that I was a good person because what does that mean, right? I'm capable of doing the right thing. I'm capable of doing good things, but I'm probably more so capable of doing things that cause harm and upset people. And I think we used to have this default understanding of people making mistakes and getting things wrong.
Hmm.
That was social life, and even if you were religious or not, like
Hmm.
we used to think that that was the case, and now
Wait, was that true? 'Cause, I mean, I'm not British, and my family has
Mhm.
not been in your lands for many a generation, so I'm kind of distant from you. But there's this image of Victorian England where mores were very strictly enforced, but maybe they were only enforced in certain realms of society, not other rungs, not realms.
I I mean, I think there's probably kind of a fantasy and a stereotype of the
But you go
Victorians.
back before that, you got your heresy laws, right? You got your kings cutting off wives' heads, you know.
Yeah, but what does this have to do with?
Well, there's just cycles of tightening and then loosening of acceptable or the tolerance for unacceptable, quote unquote. expression.
Right, but I don't know. We seem to have a kind of morality police who are operating as vigilantes, right? This is not the people who are like going after me, and not, as far as I know, state employees. Although one of them does work for Cherie Blair, which is weird. But they're sort of self-appointed. You know, they declare themselves anti-fascists who are like, you know, they need to stop evil people, especially some women, having bad thoughts and
Women.
speaking in
Yeah.
public.
Is this the crossover with the gender critical?
Right, so I've been cancelled twice. Once for being a TERF, even though I was very, very gentle about it. I just said, like, can we have a conversation? And the other for apparently being a neo-Nazi, which is news to me. But I joked about being a Nazi in a private chat, so that proves, therefore, that I'm fully in line with every policy that Hitler had and his party in Germany in the 1930s. So
that specter, there was a dust up that I'm still like sifting through the rubble of, about two American people had a conversation. One of them, his name is Tucker Carlson. He's an independent content creator. And this other guy, Daryl Cooper, I don't want to bore my audience by going over and over again, but they brought up, Daryl Cooper, who's this podcast guy, love his content. He just brought up some takes on the great, do you guys call it the Great War, or is that the first one was the Great War?
the First World War is the Great War.
Okay, but so for you, it's World War II?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that the specter of the Nazis and Hitler just hangs over us, even though it's, 80 years now. It's like, is it time to get over that? Is it time to find a new frame of reference?
Well, it's not particularly helpful, to be fair. I mean, and also, again, I think that people don't have the ontology or the metaphysics or the moral system to bear ideas of pure evil. It's like, you know, that implies a whole worldview. And it's like Hitler is like the stand-in for Satan, you know, except it's secular. You know, and I think that people should be able to question with evidence the narrative that we've received. I mean, of course, post World War II, we have a liberal consensus that is founded on certain myths about who the good guys are, right? Like it's, you know, and there are lots of things to criticize about Winston Churchill, for example, or any of the big players. Like they all had agendas, they all had different pressures on the decisions they made. And we know very well that the West didn't intervene, the Allies didn't intervene into the death camps because they were good guys, right? And I think the retroactive myths that we tell about ourselves as great heroes should be challenged, you know?
Is your country still, like, your political discourse still running on the fumes of World War II, or is it now into this? Like, does Keir Starmer evoke that narrative to justify
I guess not even, because Winston Churchill is sort of tainted because of things he did around India and the Kurds, and I mean, you know, like this is not a simple story, right? And like these governments did terrible things. So I think there is a kind of war on history as such, right? Like it's like the whole of the past was bad, you know, and we just need to take down all the statues and start again, because now we're good people because we have iPhones or something.
Yeah, and then the reaction to that is to accuse anybody of challenging the heroes of the past as having an agenda, or like a right-leaning leftwardness, or like the right woke thing. It's that we're going to revive. There's this word called revisionist, which is just an interesting word to have as a bad word, because aren't we kind of always like revising our points of view and like reassessing the facts and then like making decisions based on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess it has a specific meaning vis-a-vis the Holocaust in particular, right? So the idea of being a revisionist would be something like, you know, you're questioning the numbers of people killed, or, you know. Yeah.
People are really sensitive about that.
Well, I mean, I again, the Holocaust is held up as the single worst thing. It's like the apex of evil action, you know, the deliberate targeting and murdering of an entire group of people on the basis of ethnicity and or religion, because Judaism is complicated in that way. No, I mean,
there could be no poetry after the Holocaust. I forget which great French thinker.
That was Adorno who said that,
Yeah.
so Frankfurt School. But yes, I mean, he later stepped back a little bit from that. But yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
there's a sort of exceptionality to that level. I actually went to Auschwitz earlier this year and to some of the other work camps and death camps. And one of the things that becomes very visible is that, as Agamben, this great Italian philosopher, says, that in a way, after, well, it's like the whole world starts to resemble a camp. And you really get that feeling because what the camps were in a way is also this apex of enlightenment rationality, the idea that you can make a machine or that you can efficiently destroy anything,
Impurity. Yeah.
up to including people. So when you see like the water towers, the fact that like the whole camps were insured by German insurance companies who put bids out to tender for, like the whole mechanism of bureaucracy, the whole
Wait.
uh
Insured against what? The
uh
war?
like fire. So you
Okay,
had
yeah.
insurance
Accidents and stuff.
companies, yes, but as if a kind of death camp was like a viable insurance proposition, and it was just yes another thing that you could insure. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the fact that there is this kind of grotesque mechanization of death and incineration,
Hmm.
and then it is difficult to see the rest of the modern world outside of that framework, like because everything is bureaucratic, everything is institutionalized, and I think if anything, it makes you more of an anarchist or like an anti-bureaucracy. Like
Hmm.
this is where bureaucracy gets us, is just the banal everyday murder of human beings,
Hmm.
in a
Hmm.
place that has insurance.
Well, but why? That image is obviously has sticking power because it is so grotesque, morbid, and evil. But the same process that packed Auschwitz restocks Costco.
Yeah.
So it's the same process, right? Why can't we, I guess, is it important to be aware of that? Or is it important to always say that that's probably what it's going to do if but for the grace of God or something?
No, I mean, I think it's not inevitable, but I think it's just this kind of, it's like the possibility of a system is always to turn into its opposite or to turn into something evil. And this is why I think like
Hmm.
institutions, like all institutions, whether it's the church or the university or whatever, like people need to be constantly aware of like the power of these things. Because even though they're comprised of people, and you might say like an institution is a group of people, there's something like institutionalization, which is not just like what happens to people when they're in an institution like a prison or an asylum, but also the people who work for an institution. Like I would say, for example, in Britain, like we have the BBC and the civil service, and these are totally captured institutions. These are places filled with people who are too afraid to go against the ideology of the day, which is extremely progressive and bears no relation to reality.
Hmm.
Um, they're afraid to speak out. The BBC also has huge problems with kind of abusive people, like people who abuse children who work for them. And, this is not just some like deranged paranoid fantasy. It's actually the case, and there are several named
Do they have
examples.
they reported on their own wrongdoing?
People don't because they are afraid of well, they're afraid of the structure, but they're afraid of people in power. And there is a kind of hierarchy in these things, right? So people don't want to um rock the boat,
Hmm.
and people don't want to lose their jobs because they've got families and whatever. Like nobody wants to say, hang on a minute, like
Yeah.
this thing you're getting us to go along with isn't true or is actually actively dangerous.
I want to push against or expand on. You said the institution's captured. There's this other meme
Mm-hmm.
that goes around as a system. The purpose of a system is what it does. So maybe it's not captured.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's just following its true form. This
Well,
progressivism, this wokeness, this all the
okay,
manifestation of it's just.
sure, but this would maybe even more anti-institutional because then, like Ivan Illich would say, it's like institutions basically by their nature at a certain point turn into their opposite, like they go horribly wrong. Like the school starts off about learning and teaching, and then it ends up just being like a prison for children. Or like healthcare starts off being about healing, and then it just turns into creating sick people because it needs patience. You know what I mean? Like there's a machine. This is what I mean. It's like the machine, like the institution becomes a machine. And when something becomes a machine, it becomes really, really dangerous. So potentially, because it's like it's going to chew you up. It's going to chew
Yeah.
us
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. You know, that's the one aspect of this concept called the trans kid. That is
But
this,
there are no trans children, obviously. I
well,
mean, these
hold
are
on,
these
but,
are pseudo concepts. They don't
yeah,
exist.
well, yeah, but that concept itself allows the machine
Yeah.
to take on the aura of grace and humanity and compassion. And
Yeah.
then what it actually does is sacrifice children, and
Yeah.
not just the body of the child that it's medicalizing and sterilizing and mutilating, but all of the future children that could have come to being through that one child is all just masticated. And then
Yeah.
there's this beautiful idea, the trans kid that we must protect. It's so, it's
But
kind of
this is what
amazing. I wonder if there's
happens.
positive visions of that, but go on, please.
No, I mean, well, okay. I think what this is like the recreation of a sacred. It's like, you know, it's very difficult to live in a world without separation of like sacred and profane. And the secular liberal world was supposed to be past all of that. But all that's happened is that we've just reinvented it. And, you know, in the wake of a kind of post-Christianity. So, yeah, so you create this sacred caste that are sort of
Yeah.
protected.
But how do we, so there is some discourse among my, well, friend group. I don't know to what extent I'm alienating them by questioning this, but this very, the classical liberal set, they have their theories, they have their stories, they have their bad guys, everything that is, that works against their liberty, their sacred principle of the Constitution is the functionary of some sort of Gnostic cult or something like that, right? And so any effective counter to what you're describing, this bureaucratization, the longhouse, however you want to particularly describe it or make a symbol out of it, any effective opposition will have the elements of fascination, of the mystical, of the sacred, and the profane, and that mode of relating to the world, and that way of tying together people in order to change things, you know, like that collective will come to being not under the Constitution, not under a rationalist constitution system, but maybe not. But it seems like everybody who is capable, all the thought leaders that are capable of instituting or reinstituting a rationalist liberal system have already themselves been kicked out of the system that created them and that they believe in.
Yeah, so you could say this is the logical endpoint or a certain point in the nature of that.
It seems like that argument could be made. I'm not necessarily saying that, but I'm saying that when the rational liberals are kicked out of their irrational now systems, and then they're thrust into the same proximity as people who were already thrust out of it a long time ago or who never believed in it to begin with, then they try to order the camp of the people who are already the outsiders and trying to pine for this. I keep on coming back to true liberalism has never been tried kind of.
Would you define yourself as a liberal in that sense?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I'm absolutely a liberal. There was this post on Twitter today that was really interesting that championed the classical liberals in a way that totally made sense to me. There are clades within the United States that are basically more or less Protestant, who basically solve things through rational dispute management systems, and who live stable lives with stable marriages, and they produce children. And they're a manifestation of the actual blood and soil of liberalism, like liberalism, the applied liberalism. And that is, but it's part of a culture. That way of being is a part of a culture, and that culture actually does have more of a religious leaning than this academic or lawyerly kind of rational liberalism thing. So it can manifest. And I am of that clade. I'm basically, I approach people from that. That is I can't deny that. But I also know that system is no longer dominant.
Well, it's interesting if you look at the natural law tradition, right? So the writers of the founders of the Constitution were engaging in natural law theory, right? Which is
Hmm.
basically like, well, and you can have religious versions of it and non-religious versions of it. There are kind of rationalists who are natural law theorists, but they're not theological, right? But they want to say something like it is of the nature of the human that we can engage in reason, and we have the
Yeah.
gift of reason, right? Either through God-given, it's a God-given part of our creatureliness, and it differentiates us from animals, over which we have dominion, but also stewardship. Um, but it is also gives us a beautiful capacity to dialogue with each other, right? And to speak and to reason and to come to a greater understanding of the world and each other. And in that sense, yes, I mean, I completely agree with this model of rationality. And I wish I don't know how to put it. It's like there has to be a connection between reason and truth, right? We
Hmm.
if we're talking about the world, if we're trying to describe, let's say, unhappy children, right?
Hmm.
How are we going to do this? Okay, this child seems upset. Okay, they're saying that they're upset for this and that reason, and maybe they're getting ideas from the internet. Okay, these are new ideas, like these are new terms. We didn't have these in the 90s. Like nobody
Hmm.
was using this language. Okay, so we can then say, is there a new feature of humanity that somehow developed, or is this a kind of some sort of social I don't know, contagion or fad along the
Hmm.
lines of other ones that we can point to in the Middle Ages, but also
Yeah.
in the 60s. So, there's always been these things like the Satanic Panic and so on. And I think actually there was probably more evidence for the Satanic Panic
I
than
don't
there is.
know. I've talked to some people who talk about our current government and connections to Satanism and child sacrifice and stuff. Not that I agree with that at all, but the
No,
theories are still alive and thriving.
yeah, it's not my area at all. But I have friends who are very no. There's
No,
a guy called
Scout Satan's honor.
Jason Horsley in the UK, who's like an amazing, he's from a Fabian family and he has a fantastic
Mm.
insight into the entire history of these
Oh,
mechanisms.
really? I'll have to talk
Yeah.
to him.
Oh, he's fantastic. He has a Substack called Children of Job. But he's written many books, 16 Maps of Hell, and that
Hmm.
describe these kind of networks in the UK. It's very
Mm.
interesting.
Mm.
Anyway, but yeah, so I suppose it's like, how do we use our reason collectively to try to get to a truer picture of the world, right? And
Hmm.
of course, we have to do that through dialogue, through disagreement. Um, but I think the attack on something like the idea that there are two sexes, which is basically what was being asserted in science, religion, myth, like the entire history of humanity, like up until 15 years ago or 10 years ago, whatever. Um, it's like why are people trying to get behind that? That assertion, that
Hmm.
truth claim that has been made by humanity in all these different registers, literature, religion, science.
Hmm.
Um, what is going on there? And I'm not sure I go along with the Gnostic thing. I have entertained that idea that this is a kind of neo-Gnostic rebellion, and clearly
Hmm.
there is a hatred of matter. There's clearly an unhappiness. There's clearly a Cartesian split between the mind and the body, and the idea is that if you fix the body, you can fix the mind. This is not healthy, right? Very vividly and obviously.
Hmm.
But I think more broadly, a culture that celebrates. Well, celebrates is the wrong word. A culture that venerates safety above all is actually a very dangerous society because it says something like people can't learn anything from suffering and that
Hmm.
there are no collective rituals of suffering like adolescence because like nobody has a great time going through puberty. Like it's always weird and painful. And the point would be that everybody suffers. Everybody suffers. And I think trying to make suffering singular in that way, like I'm special in my suffering, is very dangerous and actually very alienating and atomizing and takes people away from their families and communities.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
of course, people are seeking new families, like online families. So it's not like the desire to be part of a collective has gone.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
not atomic. We are desperately seeking always community
Yeah.
and recognition. There's a recognition crisis.
A
Um,
recognition crisis.
yeah, insofar as that there are so many people who want to be seen and they want to be understood and they want to be noticed. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that there is this idea that you can take shortcuts. It's not through hard work, it's not through improving your character. This is why all of those things sort of were suddenly designated right wing. It's like if you work out, then you must be right wing. It's like, no, 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 no. Like everyone sort of should look after themselves, right?
I don't
It's
know
not
if it
even.
was a parody or not, but there was an article that was floating around that laughter is the latest alt-right tactic or something like that.
Oh, no, come on.
I
Come
think
on.
it was probably a
That,
parody, but they did do working out.
No, but I do think there is an attack on humor. It's like, yeah, the moment you say that certain groups can't be laughed at. I mean, I'm very 90s in this sense. I think we reached a genuine collective understanding in the 90s, which was that no
Mm.
group is off limits.
Hmm.
Everyone and everything can in principle be laughed at, including and especially ourselves. And that laughter is, in fact, a de-escalation tactic. It is that which takes us further away from war and horror
Hmm.
and violence because it basically like makes everything lighthearted. It's
Yeah.
like I don't want to put people in a death camp if I'm having a funny time. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't know. Unless you're doing like a Mel Brooks kind of
well, yeah,
skit gone awry.
right. But then that's the humor that pushes things to such a limit that it
Yeah.
destroys the whole, seriousness and
Yeah.
I yeah. So humor seems absolutely vital, and there is a kind of fake literalism. I don't know if it's real, but like people pretending to take things literally and like saying,
Yeah.
well, when this character said this or did this, or when this person made a joke, they meant it. It was literal. Like people do this to me. And it's like,
Yeah. No, they've
why is
done it
there
to
is there
me.
only one way? Is there one way of saying things? I mean,
Yeah.
this is pretty.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that there is just a certain percentage of people who lack the capacity for registering polysemy, or
Yeah.
multiple layers of meaning.
Hmm.
But also there are emotional states that definitely curtail that. And I think that people get acclimated to reaction. At least that's, my experience of interacting with the feminists when I was studying the gender issue. I kept on running afoul of them because I would make a joke, specifically with words. I would use words and I would twist them, and they were really easy to trigger with certain words. Like I got in a lot of trouble when I played on the trope that women are more emotionally adept and men are more like problem solving adept. And it's just something that I was noticing in my personal relationships.
Hmm.
And they got so mad. Are you calling women irrational? And they went so irrational. And it all came down to the words that I used, emotional and rational. And I was playing on
Hmm.
the word of ratio, of having things in proportion, being able to look at things in different, and then they fell right into the trap. And I think that there's part of them, one, it's the emotion, two, it's how they bind themselves through agreement. They have these,
Hmm.
and I noticed this specifically with the feminists, and I think they're easy to study because they do this so frequently and impassionately. They have these kind of rituals that they do where they need to burn the witch. They need to have a scapegoat. They get all this negative energy between themselves, and they can't disagree for whatever reason without an argument happening. So they find somebody they can collectively disagree with and then denounce and then pillory, and it kind of exhausts the tension within their group. And I was just that lightning rod for a few times.
I
It was really interesting.
Yeah, I think both men and women do that. I mean, scapegoating is like the oldest thing,
No,
really.
absolutely. It's
But
just, it was
but
really interesting to study the feminists doing that. But it
yeah,
happens in all these groups.
no, sure. But I think there are definite differences in the way that men and women do it. So
Hmm.
famously or infamously, women engage in reputation destruction,
Yeah.
and it's all kind of verbal violence, and it's like yeah, like bitching about someone or excluding them. Because like we're not really likely to have a fist fight because we're not
No, no.
that
And you guys
that's
play the
not
long
what.
game, and you're very, get those talons and things. I'm
Yeah, I mean,
leaning into some misogynistic tropes.
no, 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 no. I don't mind at all that any of these claims, but I suppose. Well, I mean, first of all, I would say there's some interesting bits of first and second wave feminism that I would defend. Like, it's the weirder esoteric bits, like some of the psychedelic second wave. I'm really quite a fan of the kind of cosmic mother stuff. I think there's some very
The
interesting
divine
things there.
feminine kind of stuff.
No, yeah, kind of. Like there's just some very, very interesting, like quite far out, like trippy stuff from the second wave that no one reads and everyone thinks is embarrassing and
Oh,
essentialist.
really?
But
What
yeah,
do you mean
yeah.
essentialist, and why is being essentialist a problem?
Well, because it's like saying that there is a kind of female nature and a male nature, right? I mean, you're just generalizing, right?
Yeah.
But there's a kind of
Oh,
general
then
edict in
yeah,
the
generalization kind of slips into essentialization, and they hate the essentialization, so
right.
they hate the
So
generalization. So,
yeah. So well, I'm a big fan of looking at the things that people don't want to talk about. I think it's really important and very revealing when people say, no, we can't talk about X or Y.
yeah,
Or XX and XY. And I say, yeah, of course we can. We can talk about anything. In fact, we have to talk about everything with
yeah.
everyone as much as possible until such time as we run out of time. And, this is how we understand the world. This is how we understand each other. And I don't think anyone should be ostracized or whatever. And of course, this is going to be impossible, but this is like a framework. Anyway, so I would say people really don't like today talking about nature or essential essence. Like when you say a thing is this thing and it has these capacities and it's not this
Yeah.
other thing.
Because there's no
And
right way to be a woman. Therefore, there can't
right.
be a feminine ideal.
Right, but this doesn't make any sense because where are all these stereotypes coming from, for goodness sake? As if there weren't some
Yeah.
kind of underlying material difference. And actually, what's wrong with difference? Difference is good, difference is beautiful. It's like the difference between men and women is what makes their relating very beautiful because we love the difference, and it's playful and it's funny and you can mock it. And this is why, like, this is what we were doing. It's like the dance, the dance and this serious like no you can't say and then we've just regressed to these horrible stereotypes and it's all like porn anyway and like ew gross and I think like that I always go on about this but the 90s there was this like high point where it's like you could be a tomboy. I was a tomboy, nobody cared, nobody said oh you must really be a man. I'm definitely like more of a problem solving person. I'm absolutely arse-led when it comes to emotion. I have no idea what people are feeling and I would always try to like solve a problem. Like, what's the matter? Like, can we fix this? And that I understand objectively, rationally, that that's really annoying when somebody just wants to sort of cry about something, right? But
What happens when you need to cry, though?
oh, I never cry. I'm
Oh,
a
really?
I'm a soldier.
Really?
No.
Do you
No,
just
but
watch your emotions unfold on stage and sip your cognac?
no, but
What-
it is interesting. I do think we can achieve an enormous degree of discipline, self-discipline, actually, and detachment. And it's a practice. And it's interesting if you read Spinoza, like Spinoza says he's a rationalist, but he says we can have a rational understanding of our emotions, that we shouldn't think of them as these sort of, mystical things that take us over and we can't control. He says, no, it's like causation. If we understand what's making us unhappy, if we keep repeating the same errors, of course we can change our feeling. We can change what we do. We can change our understanding. We can get a greater understanding. So, yeah, I do think all of us can have reflection. We can reflect. Oh, okay, I feel annoyed. I have good reason to feel annoyed. Like, in some ways lately, right?
Are there people
You know,
out there who refuse to be annoyed, other than saints?
well, I think it's like a practice. It's also like funny, It's like, oh, okay, I choose to find this funny. I can be lighthearted about being bankrupt and defamed at scale and losing my job and it's like it doesn't really matter. Like
Huh.
it's
Huh.
not the most important thing. Like having money is like a worldly thing, right? But it's not a very high value. In fact, it's a very low value. And in fact, it's like often a
Wait,
counter.
was
Yeah.
this how you took the news of the bad news of the fallout of all this lawyering that you were involved in? You just kind of, it was funny to you? Or, I mean,
Well,
was there kind of like a Job moment where disaster struck and there was a flood kind of thing and you had to grapple with your
What?
puniness in the face of these institutions or even in the face of God?
I think in the first place, if your orientation is one of fundamentally of gratitude, right? If you're grateful to be alive, and if you understand everything insofar as it's possible as an experience that you can learn from, and even when things are kind of objectively not ideal, you can at least choose to some degree how you feel about them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I so I think that all of that is possible, and I certainly think people go through terrible things all the time. I mean, there are wars happening, you know. I mean, me being defamed by idiots and losing my job and being bankrupt is nothing compared to being in a war zone, or
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean, or suffering some terrible illness or losing someone you love, or you know what I mean. It's all very relative. So I think it's absolutely possible to relativize, but even before all that, just to orient oneself to the world in such a way that everything is a gift. You know, everything is like more than enough. You know, so like I
Mm-hmm.
wake up every day and I'm grateful. You know, as a practice, like
Mm-hmm.
I like pray and I'm grateful to be alive. And I think
Hmm.
even just that repetition makes you that thing. You know what I mean? Like it's a kind
Mm-hmm.
of positive feedback loop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know there are very, very good things in my life anyway, apart from
When
all
did
this
you?
nonsense.
Were you ever not a Christian?
Yeah, I've only been a Christian for about 3 years. So I was
Okay, well,
brought up as a liberal, secular, slightly
yeah,
pagan subject.
slightly pagan. Yeah, back to the Satan thing. But
Yes, not a Satanist. No, I'm never a
no,
Satanist.
but why? How did the church attract you?
I think it was during lockdown. There's a priest I know who kept the church open during the second lockdown against the guidelines. And I started going to church with my now husband during the lockdowns. And I think it was partly this experience of having a kind of feeling of the state as a prison and this material world, it like saying that like this can't be it, like this isn't all there is, you know. So it was a kind of
Hmm.
reminder or revelation of the spiritual dimension or the dimension of the soul which can't be reduced to the state image of us, right? That doesn't make sense.
Okay.
But I suppose it was partly the ritual practice of going to church, as well as almost like a historical acceptance, actually, of the profound wisdom of Christianity, insofar as it's this unbelievably sort of beautiful unfolding story that is at the basis of the West, and it is at the basis of the liberal tradition and all of the other things, these great achievements, as well as at the basis of like most great works of art are, you know, acts of worship. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, and I suppose also like my experience of dealing with addiction, and you know, if you're in the anonymous programs, like you're always invoking the higher power. um, and yeah, I suppose this combination of things is like a
Hmm.
combination of things.
What kind of relationship do you have to Christianity? Uh, are you do you nerd out on theological minutia, and do you hate the
I mean,
papists, or is it kind of
yeah.
more just a humble embodied part that's kind of growing more and more?
I mean, more the latter, actually. And I quite like that because being a sort of nerdy, intellectual, academic type, I think
Yeah.
that kind of desire to sort of know everything about something can also be a bit deadening. And there are lots of
Hmm.
things I do know lots of things about. And I don't necessarily want to have that attitude, which is rather anatomical. You know, I can divide it all up and understand all the different parts. And so it's first and foremost going to church and being part of the community of the church. And yeah, things like the piece that we perform together and the reading of the liturgy. So it's the practice, it's the ritual, it's the singing as well. I absolutely love singing in church.
Mm,
Um,
really?
so yeah, so it's worship.
Were you a singer? And
Oh,
you guys don't have high school, but
No, I mean, I love singing, but I think my love for it outstrips my ability. But I think, but that's part of the worship because you're not trying to be the best. It's not a competition. It's your voices together as an act of worship, and I love that. So I love the kind of congregational aspect. But I am reading the Bible out loud. The Jewish Bible and the New Testament. So from beginning to end. So I'm also getting the whole, list of names,
Hmm.
just in numbers at the moment. And it turns out it's all about numbers. Did you know that, Benjamin? It's
It's just
like,
their census or something, right?
yeah, yeah. So yeah, but I quite like the fact that I'm actually like massively ignorant of this thing I'm now part of. It's sort of
Yeah.
yeah, it's humbling. It's humbling. And
Has
but
that
I do know some people who are like very very well informed, and I have some great theological conversations with people who are like seriously part of the church.
how has church going shaped your intellectual life?
Mm, well, I mean, I suppose it's interesting. There are different modes of thinking, and I would associate going to church with contemplation. And I think contemplation is a very important mode of being, if we want to call it that, and a mode of reflection and thinking, which is can relate to intellectual modes, but is not reducible to them. So
Hmm.
I think contemplation is a specific kind um, of reflection,
Hmm.
and
Is there exercises that you do? Could you illustrate it for the people who?
I suppose simply in the sense of like if you're sitting in church, you're there for an hour or so more listening to the readings from the Bible or Psalms, um,
Hmm.
reflecting on the sermon. The priest is giving a sermon, usually drawing on themes from the reading. So it's quite hermeneutic. Right? It's like interpretation of the text.
Yeah.
Um, and I suppose it's that you're in a way forced, compelled to sit there and listen. And then there are moments of silence,
Yeah.
moments of prayer,
Yeah.
and it's just a different mode, completely
I,
different mode from the outside.
in my experience, growing up Protestant, so I had a brief kind of affair with Catholicism because the liturgy meant something to me at a very specific time in my life. But so it could possibly happen in that milieu, but it's there is that you're participating in a thing, you're singing, and then you're listening. And I think what that contemplation thing that you're talking about is kind of when you say reflection, it's just
Hmm.
my awareness of me kind of comes to the fore, and I start thinking about my behaviors, thinking about my actions, thinking about my attitudes. So it is a kind of a self-examination, and I think that I owe to going to church for my youth, for kind of my sense of interiority, or like a
Mm.
more deeper sense of self, and a more an ability to be so-called deep, or to disengage from that which is shallow, maybe. And I think that might be a lost art in our society, something that kids are being denied by not being taken to church. That ability to kind of reflect, to listen, to participate. Not just the community stuff, but the actual the
Hmm.
growth that occurs in the individual in that communal environment is.
Yes, and but it's a very relational individual, and this is what I like about the confession at the beginning. It's like, every
Hmm.
week we say together, like, I have sinned in thought and word and deed, and like,
Yeah.
like through my own thoughtlessness, through my own like fault, through like
Yeah.
ignorance, through and it's a reminder of our fundamental brokenness and our fundamental weaknesses, which we can get better at recognizing and try not to feed or like
Yeah.
um express. But so I agree about the deepening of the sense of self or awareness of self, but I think it's also always in relation So you're thinking about yourself in relation to others, and it breaks that kind of narcissism, which is very encouraged otherwise by our culture, right? Like there's sort of, so there's a kind of bad interiority that is like trapped in itself. And then I think the good one, which is that how can I be a better person almost? Like how can I like not indulge these weaknesses, which we all have, the better to be a member of a community or to express God's love for us or like what we can do and what we can be. Because I think despair is always this bad interiority. It's like we're not worthy, like denialism, like where you think I'm not worthy of being a good person, or I don't matter, my life doesn't matter. And I think that nihilism is very dominant. That idea, oh well, who am I? I'm nothing. I'm nobody. And I think being religious, probably all religions, give you the sense instead that your life very much matters. That you do matter. Your soul matters. What you do matters. It's not just random. It's not anything.
I sense that there's something beyond the psychological that you are expressing. So when you use the word spiritual or soul, I don't know if you use the word spiritual, but you did use the word God and the word soul. I think it sounds to me that there is a content to those constructs, and it's not just a self-improvement.
I think those things like the therapeutic and much of what is called spiritual are like pastiches or I don't know, watered down versions of ideas that are present in Christianity. But take, for example, like the value, like the inversion of value. Like there's loads of passages in the Bible that talk about wealth and how actually being a rich person is anti-Christian and that what you should do is get rid of all your stuff and like, you can't really be rich and go to heaven. And one of the very interesting effects of those sorts of ideas or those sorts of criticisms, I mean, first of all, is actually how revolutionary they are. And there is a strong case to say that there is a kind of socialism, clearly a kind of socialist aspect to Christianity, which is not the same as this liberal progressive version of the church, which is just the same in, weird takeover. But really a much more radical critique of hierarchy of wealth. But what it also says is that there are other values, like the values of the world and not the values of the Christian, this is, so that's what I mean. It's like the soul, if you think from the standpoint of the soul, it's not worldly, or it can't be reduced to the worldly. It's not simply a matter of like working out or eating the right food or whatever. It's not lifestyleism. It's not like being the best possible version of yourself in that sense. And in fact, some of the things you might be compelled to do would go against worldly success. They would actually be opposed to those forms of recognition or achievement. Because they would involve like sacrifice, which is not a very popular idea. Like the idea that you might have to sacrifice or lose something. And when we think about, I don't know, like the childlessness epidemic, of which I'm a part, I don't have children, there are many, many reasons for this state of affairs. But I think one of them is also a kind of this diminution of the role of suffering and the embrace of suffering, the idea that actually life is not necessarily easy, that it might involve pain, it might involve difficulty, it might involve loss. And I certainly think for when I speak to some younger people, they're very, very afraid of any possibility of loss in particular. Like the idea that they don't want to have children in case something goes wrong. And this would be the worst unimaginable trauma. Whereas like 2 generations ago, like my grandmother like lost 3 or 4 brothers and sisters in like random circumstances. And like there were 13 of them, like it's not that long ago that even in our own countries, people were having a lot more children and the mortality rates were a lot higher. And of course, it was horrible and painful and devastating, but it was sort of more accepted as a part of real life, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Do you think God is something that can be believed in? And do you believe in God?
I do, but I think belief I think there's a kind of really mealy mouthed or like mean version of belief, which is that basically nothing could reach that standard. And there's this kind of midwit Reddit idea that like either you believe or you don't. And it's like, oh, how can you believe in something that doesn't exist? You know, like that kind of like really watered down new atheist thing where it's like, oh, I'm so clever and you're so stupid. Like, and I think we were really brought up with this idea that religious believers were like somehow intellectually less sophisticated than you know, high class atheists who are like,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, understood that these were just sort of myths and stories. So, but I think belief actually is first and foremost much more a question of a practice, and rather it's not like a statement. It's not like you say, "I affirm that I think X." But rather it's a kind of, and I think Kierkegaard would say this, like it's a kind of constant struggle. Like belief is not like a one-off axiomatic statement, like I assert this,
Mm-hmm.
but rather it's a kind of ongoing, difficult thing, actually, and has to be kind of reaffirmed and you have to remind yourself, and but then kind of operate in the light of that decision or that kind of orientation.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of deepens. So it's something like deepens. You know, it's not a statement. And the same would go for like the truth of religion. Like I think Christianity is true, but I think we have a very narrow definition of truth that we try to then apply to it and say, well, it's not true in the same way that 2 + 2 = 4 is true, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
that's because we've got a weak version of a definition of truth, you know. So I think
Well,
we need to
what's this broader definition of truth or belief?
the truth I can be sort of felt in more subtle ways, right? And that I think, for example, like there is a truth in wisdom. Like so when we read stories from the Bible that are parables that are trying to tell us something about human nature or about desire or about frustration or about anger or about whatever, that
Mm-hmm.
there are truths in those stories. You wouldn't be able to sort of point to them in a sort of correspondence way, but they
Mm.
inform you, like they give you a kind of wisdom. So I suppose it's like there is a sort of wisdom that is like a truth, and it's a truth about us. It's a kind of anthropological truth in that
Mm.
sense.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so and it might involve, yeah, myth, it might involve story, it might involve description. It's not
It
just
might
this
involve
kind of,
this word called God.
well, yeah, of course. um
But, so what does
yeah,
that word mean to you? Or what does God mean to you, rather?
I'd say everything.
Yeah.
um but yeah, I mean, I definitely struggle with the kind of residual paganism, which is a heresy. So I definitely have a sort of Spinozist tendency, which is to say to be unable to separate the creator from the creation.
Okay.
So you know that this idea of nature, like Spinoza will talk about Deus sive natura, God or nature,
Oh,
um,
okay.
as if they're two different ways of looking at the same thing. And so he has this idea of like that God is immanent to his creation. So God is nature, which is a heresy, clearly, because if you're
Is
a
it more or
Christian,
less a heresy than the cosmic mother, second wave
well,
feminist fever dream?
yes, I mean it's about on the same level of
Okay.
heresy, to be honest. Yes, absolutely. But you know, my feeling is, well, there's also kind of model of truth, which is like the more perspectives you can take at once, the truer things are, right? So
Huh.
it's quite Nietzschean, you know. It's like the more different angles on the same thing you can bear, like the more truth you have, you know.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But God, or the concept of God, which is two different things, from my point of view, and maybe you agree with this, seems to have the opposite effect of a concept like Cosmic Mother, or the patriarchy, maybe, and not just the feminist version of the patriarchy, but if you just look at the will of man, you know, like those kind of mythological symbols can accrue a lot of meaning to them, and they get more and more robust with the more meaning they accrue. But something like God has this this openness that it just, no matter how much meaning you throw on it, it's more likely that meaning itself will get in the way of the concept than to provide you access.
Yeah, so this is the idea of, I guess, like a apophanic idea that you can only define God negatively, right? Like, or that you can't make positive claims in that sense. I think there's something to that. I mean, in terms of like the creation of the sexes, like, you know, God created man and woman, right? Like, and there's something so amazing about that. It's like, well, why is there sexual difference at all? Like, why is human?
It's kind of disturbing if you look at it in a certain point of view. You're like, yeah, it's just like, why are there two types of us? There's two types of me.
And this is the weird thing, because we talk about humanity and human beings and the human body, but there is no human body, right?
Yeah, no.
There's no neutral. There's like, there are only men and women. There's no third sex. There's never been a true hermaphrodite, and there's no one who's not either, right? So literally every human being, even people with disorders of sexual development, they're all disorders of male and female. Like, it's the single most truthful thing you can say about human beings.
About humans, yeah.
Is that they are either male or female. Like this is it. Like, and that tells us nothing about how we should act or what we should wear, and you know, we know all that, right? But we are literally either male or female, and you know, that's amazing and totally weird. So there's no humanity. There are only men and women.
Is there a theological aspect to that, or how do you square that with?
Well, it's one of the first things in the Bible. I mean, God creates the world and everything in it, and then he creates Adam, and then he creates Eve. So yeah, I mean, it's right up there, like page 2.
Yeah, but what does that tell you about us? I mean, you got part of how I came across you was that you were being one of those edgelord post-feminist bitches. I'm kidding. You know, you're being kind of like sympathetic to men and a little critical of feminism in a time where that was kind of... So, like, that was part of your analysis. I believe you wrote at least one book about the topic, right? So it's something you've been thinking about prior to your COVIDian revelation of the truth of Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. But so how does the biblical theology and your relationship with your soul and your husband too and the church add or deepen your understanding of what it is to be a male or female?
I think greatly. And I mean, the book I wrote, What Do Men Want, is sort of implicitly Christian. It's not explicitly so. But it's a sort of Christian humanist book in a weird way. As some people noticed.
Did you know that? Yeah.
Sort of. Although, I mean, it was interesting. The Christian reviewers noticed it. So I had a review by a Catholic and a review by an Anglican and a review by a Catholic. And they both thought it was a religious book, which is interesting. And one of them thought it was...
because the axis of manhood has something to do with sacrifice? Just...
No, well, I think because, I don't know, maybe because of the insistence on sexual difference, it was perceived to be almost...
That's a religious standpoint now?
No, not only, but it also, it's it's literally every standpoint that makes any sense at all. But I think partly because I was talking about the possibility of being good men and good women, and I was saying we need to bring back
there's
kind
a
of
moral content.
There really is, and because that's where the book went. You know, like first and foremost, I wanted to look at all of the manosphere stuff, masculinism, the toxic middle, all of that discourse. But actually what the book ended up being about was about the relation between men and women. So like, what does
Yeah.
it mean to live in a heterosocial world, which is to say a mixed world, which is the world we live in. We don't have separate spheres. They've all been smashed in the Industrial Revolution. Um,
Hmm.
and we have to get along. And so it's very pragmatic in that sense. It's not, it's like saying, how best do we get along with each
Yeah.
other in all of these different
Which
ways?
bends you towards the good, which
Yeah,
is ultimately a religious conversation.
well, it doesn't have to be. There, like I say, there can be natural law theories that are about reason and goodness that are not theological, but they overwhelmingly are. But I think people can carve out a position, yeah, as many humanists have. They say we don't need religion in order to make decisions about the good,
Hmm.
and that's great, as long as people are making decisions about the good, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
That align with the good for sure, for sure. Yeah.
yeah. And hopefully the better they cleave to nature, the better, right? Like rather than just making something up and saying like, I want this to be true and therefore it's true. And if you say it's not true, I'm going to take your job away, or whatever.
You still seem a little burned by that.
No,
No,
fine.
you seem a little that you haven't completely loved your enemy completely.
I try. I think this is an ongoing practice. I actually do. I pray for the people who have
Ruined your
slandered
life.
me.
Okay.
No, honestly, I do, and I actually think it's really important. Partly for my own sanity,
Yeah.
partly because I think I should, because one is the point about the kind of de-escalation, the point about refusing to engage in revenge is for all kinds of reasons. Like there are many reasons, but I think this is one of the great innovations of Christianity is that you don't go for revenge. That you refuse the desire to
Mm-hmm.
hurt somebody who's hurt you, as
Mm-hmm.
difficult as that is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all good. I pray for my enemies. I love them. Hopefully this is even more annoying.
Maybe that is your vengeance. But back to men and women. How is your spiritual life?
Yeah.
Not just Christian theology, but just participating in contemplation, maybe even being married,
Hmm.
deepened your understanding and appreciation and gratitude of the sexes. And what have you learned that you could add to the conversation about that, about where we're headed, what's going on now with these absolutely frustrated groups of men and women, especially young people?
I think there is if your starting point is that God created men and women and that there is a fundamental
Hmm.
complementarity and compatibility and companionship, and I think Christianity of all the major religions is the one that actually gives women and children more room. Like it's a really egalitarian, like it says that men and women are different. And it says that children need protecting, as do widows and other groups of more vulnerable people. And it recognizes that. It recognizes that importance of weakness and protection of people who are, who are poor or suffering. But I think it also very much says that men and women are equal in their difference, and they have different strengths and different virtues. But that the relation between the two is, I don't know, potentially very beautiful, and it's not straightforwardly one of domination, and
Hmm.
or, and I think monogamy, Christian marriage, compared to polygamy, is clearly a much better deal, like for the woman and children.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think that Christianity reaches almost like a cultural high point, a civilizational high point
Hmm.
as well.
Hmm.
So I would, yeah.
Well, what are you going to do with all the Muslims in your midst? That's a trick question. There's this kind of rumblings of Christo-fascism or Christian nationalism in my country, but that's typical American, like pulpit speak and fear mongering.
Hmm.
Both the people who are for it and the people who are against it kind of do these grand sweeping things. But watching your country go from being a Christian country to being a secular country to now being a Muslim secular, weird hodgepodge, polyamory and Islam at the same time, and squeezing out Christianity. What's your perspective on the path of Britain now that it has divorced itself from Christ? That's a very dramatic way of saying, things.
Well, I think there's a lot going on. I mean, we also have a kind of Christian revival in
Is there?
some quarters. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it may be overblown media-wise, but I certainly meet a lot of young people who have going to church who are not from religious backgrounds. I know a lot of Catholics in particular who are very, very powerful thinkers and quite important in politics and the media. And yeah, so it's a very mixed picture. I certainly think the question of the role of Islam is going to be increasingly important, and there clearly are differences in terms of what that means. I am friends with some Muslims. I live with an Egyptian asylum seeker, lived with me for 2 years. Really
Oh, you put your money
beautiful.
where your liberal bleeding heart mouth
Absolutely.
was.
Yeah, yeah. I used to give all my money away. Now I give all my money away a different way. No, I don't have any to give away. But no, I redid, redistribution. I put people up. I paid for this asylum seeker to live with me, and he was very, very reverent. He was a very, very sort of serious practicing Muslim, but also very polite and light-hearted about it. Um, and I and it was actually very interesting to come to some understanding of how Muslims look after each other. Like they really do. Like they have much stronger community ties. He was able to find work in the grey market just in a way, just by asking people at the mosque. And there is a sense of a community, the ummah, or it's a kind of spiritual bond that I think is very, very. So Islam's very powerful. It's a very, very powerful religion, and it's very, very attractive. I think, particularly if you're a young man. Um, I've written for Ayan Hirsi Ali recently, so I'm quite, interested. I don't feel personally qualified to write clearly, no way, in the way that she does. She makes very strong pronouncements about the dangers of Islam, and she's written a book about the grooming gangs and so on. And she's clearly very, very rightly worried. Is also,
Yeah, her
has
arc is indicative of something. Didn't she
yeah,
recently
yes,
open
she
herself up
converted.
to the yeah.
Yeah, she converted to Christianity after being a kind of figurehead of the new atheist
Yeah.
movement.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Richard Dawkins has repeatedly says that he thinks of himself as a cultural Christian, and I think that kind of position has thawed a little bit, like that people have come to a greater understanding about the inheritance of the West from
Yeah.
Christianity. There's a
Yeah.
lot of that argument been made.
Yeah.
Tom Holland in Dominion and a lot of the post-liberal positions are really pointing out this kind of continuity rather than this, severe Enlightenment break or something like
Yeah.
this.
Well, yeah.
Um, yeah, so and she has to have armed protection wherever she travels, and she can't go to certain bits of London, and it's serious. So I don't know because yeah, I want to say in an optimistic and hopeful way that there are forms of understanding between different religious groups and different people on the basis of a shared humanity. Um, but
Yeah, but
there's
can there be a shared
undoubtedly
Britishness?
well, this is the thing. I mean, it's a problem if you're saying to white British people that they're not allowed to feel proud of anything at all, and in fact they have to feel horrible about their history, even if they're like me, like Anglo-Irish, or it's like, well, really, what am I supposed to feel guilty for like being a peasant? Like most people are, or being, obviously most people never benefited from colonialism or and then the picture on that is quite mixed if you look at Nigel Big R's work, and there's been some sort of attempt
Yeah.
to look again at that but yeah, there's a great stupidity in the land. I mean, maybe you have a great stupidity in your life. I'm very interested in this problem of stupidity. This is my
Oh. Okay, this is different than midwittery.
Well, yes, I think it's more serious, actually. Like, the midwit is funny. It's always funny to dismiss the midwit. And of course, one is never the midwit. One is always at the high end of the bell curve, whether one actually is or not. But, the person who calls someone else a midwit couldn't possibly ever be a midwit. But we're all midwits most of the time. But that's
so what
fine.
is the stupidity then?
Well, I think there's a kind of stupidity that becomes indistinguishable from malice, right? And there is a stupidity that resides in the inability or the refusal to accept that other people have an argument that makes sense. So it's partly this idea that people can only hold a view different to yours because they're bad.
Yeah. That upsets me.
Yes, me too.
Well, but when my enemies do it, I laugh. But when my friends do it, I cry.
Yeah, and I think we're all stupid as well. Like, I want to say, we're all.
Well, not me, but totally you.
But I think it's this recognition of a kind of dumbness, like a chosen dumbness. Like, I mean, I suppose it's like willful stupidity.
Yeah.
So it's like when people
elective ignorance.
Refuse to accept that there may be another angle or that they could be open to revision on a particular topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't play your cards right, you can end up in there just as a matter of course. You can kind of paint yourself into that corner if you don't do things right. If you make a mistake that you can't let go of for one reason or another, it leads you to that having to just allow that part of your soul or your being or your personality to have that kind of rigid carapace.
Yes. Yes, and that's kind of sunk cost fallacy, or and people can engage in cognitive dissonance, like around scapegoating. Like, people know that it's not okay to scapegoat people, but it's like once someone's been scapegoated, they kind of justify it. Well, say, oh, but she must have deserved it somehow, or he probably did something wrong, or because
I'm sure
otherwise,
I do that.
I'm sure we all do it, and the point would be. Exactly, but the point would be like, because the alternative is to have to look at yourself and say, wow, I was part of a mob and I ganged up on someone out of ignorance just because like my friend said so, or, because I felt like it, because I wanted to be mean. And it's very difficult. I think I'm very interested in trying to live without as much cognitive dissonance as possible,
Would you know it if you were doing it?
I have known it because I did live with it. Before I said something about the gender stuff and my misgivings, I lived with cognitive dissonance for about a year. And it was really painful because I kept thinking, like, am I missing something? Am I a horrible person?
Yeah.
What have I got wrong? Like, I need to go over the arguments again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it took a while. It took a long time, and no one would speak to me about it.
Oh yeah, so you're kind of
because everyone was like, no.
Yeah, because they wanted to protect their own stupidity.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure that's stupidity, but I suppose it's like I'm interested in these moments where people, willfully refuse to understand something that they know better, but they don't want to, for whatever reason. Self-protection.
Yeah.
Social status. This is the other thing Christianity's really good on. Like, social status doesn't matter. Like, it's not even real. Like, it's not real. Like, it doesn't even exist.
Well,
like, there is no... there is no social status.
Yeah, well, see, I think it's a corruption of Christianity. So I think that it's important that Christianity has a service and has a church where you go and you do the liturgy and you contemplate, you remove yourself from life. And in that environment, which probably kind of laid the groundwork for this liberal notion that everybody's equal in front of the law, in that environment, God looks upon all of us the same. Like, we are all similar in the sight of God. And in that environment, we can disengage from the matter of matter, the matter of money, hierarchy, status. But outside of those gates, at least if you look at Christianity historically in the Middle Ages, there was an acceptance of hierarchy. And, and the mercantile class might be an exception that kind of proved the rule and led to our current modern problems. But, money is just, it is what it is. Riches are what they are. And if everybody, and that's what I find very beautiful about Christianity as a community, that these stories, even on an intellectual level or on a class level, everybody's equal under the law, under the eyes of God. So the rich man and the poor man, they meet there. And the mighty and the poor meet there. And the intellectual and the stupid person, the child even, can go and listen to the same story, and there's a resonance that ties them all together, and through that narrative framework, where the person who can see all the meanings and take apart and kind of play around with it and do some interpretation stuff, and the person who just like Noah, Ark, God, if butt sex bad kind of thing, down there at the lower end, just like taking the moral of I shouldn't have said that thing about
no, but
sodomy,
but that's exactly right, because it's not an intellectual exercise, and it's not a question of like how, even one's capacity to understand the theology. It's about like, I don't know, like grace and the goodness of your soul. So someone could be extremely good without being very clever. You know what I mean? Like, so, and I think the liberal obsession with IQ is because this has implicitly or otherwise become the measure of man, right? And I think this is why liberalism has to disavow those people who are interested in IQ and race, for example, like this, because it's a sort of tacit admission of the fact that intelligence is in fact the thing that is valued by liberalism. It's not the goodness of someone's soul. It's not how well they behave in their community or whatever. It's not that. It's intelligence. But this is why it's this kind of unbelievably taboo subject.
Well, yeah, but on the other side, the people who use the IQ race thing to justify their own sense of superiority, that's still like, that's a little bit too far. I think that,
No, but it's also stupid, right? Because IQ has nothing to do with goodness, right? Someone being better than someone else at recognizing patterns, great.
Yeah, well, but certain societies, if you look at Haiti, Dominican Republic, certain societies are able to sustain order. And it's harder when your society's got a 60 average than it is when your society's got like a 85 or 90 average IQ.
Yeah, for sure. And there's, complicated questions about how we do that in a global world. Does it make sense for, for people to help other communities or whatever? Or, it sort of depends on your definition of civilization. We allegedly live in a civilization, but it's very uncivilized in many ways, right? It's absolutely brutal. If you compare it to something that's like simpler, lives off the land, doesn't need all this technology, like we solve problems that we ourselves create, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not a primitivist, but it's very obvious that there are different ways of living in harmony with the land, and we wouldn't necessarily say that these are like less intelligent ways. In fact, they're much more intelligent insofar as they don't like pollute their own rivers. Like, it's not very intelligent to do that. It's not very clever. Like, if we think that intelligence is like surviving for a longer time, like destroying
is this your pitch for what's your Greenpeace movement out there with the people who like super glue themselves to art?
I hate those people.
Stop oil. That's who they are. They dress up in their plastic suits and stand in traffic.
No, I'm definitely not on their side. I'm intrigued by them. I talk about them in my Iconoclasm course. They're very interesting, but they're interesting as like people who are working the media. Like, they're very postmodern as a sort of phenomena. Yeah. I don't think they really actually care about nature or the environment. It's something else.
They care about something.
They care about being in the media.
Yeah. Like throwing spores on Stonehenge or whatever that was the other
Yeah,
day.
I mean these things are just designed to annoy people. Like that's what
Yeah.
they're trying to
Do
do.
you think that they're actually shills for big oil?
Well, some people have suggested this. I don't know. I'm not deep in conspiracy, just up oil law,
No.
but
Okay. Yeah.
probably.
Wait,
Yeah,
by nature or
I
by
have
law,
heard.
you aren't into conspiracy theories?
By law, as in LORE.
Oh, lore. Okay. Yeah. Conspiracist lore. Okay. Yeah.
But yeah,
What
who
are you working
knows?
on now? What's in the
Um,
pipe?
yeah, I'm working on
In the
several
tube?
articles in the tube, in the underground
Anything
of my.
bigger than
Uh,
articles or?
yeah, I'm trying to put together a book proposal, but it's yeah, it's slow. I've been ill and lazy, and I need
Oh, sorry
to.
to hear that. Yeah.
No. Just to like winter virus, like the plague island sickness is like taking everyone.
Plague
Ah,
Island.
you know.
Well, what's attracting your attention then right now? What's most fascinating?
Well, I guess, several things. So the stupidity question, I'm giving a talk for Theory Underground on Saturday about stupidity. These guys are great. Theory Underground, I don't know if you've come across them. They're like
No.
more directly philosophy oriented. They were like working in an Amazon warehouse and they were listening to lots of really long podcasts and like educating themselves in philosophy. And then they've kind of set up their own philosophy channel. And it's like for workers first and foremost. It's really
Hmm.
cool.
Hmm.
They're very,
Hmm.
very good guys. And so
Sounds kind
stupidity.
of socialist goobly gook.
No, I mean some of them are Marxists, but they sort of know what they're talking about. They're like class first Marxists, you know.
Okay.
That's okay. I mean, like, look, we need a bit of material analysis. I'm not, so it's all good.
You're
Like,
sounding a little defensive, but that's probably because you're talking to me.
no. And then iconoclasm. I'm trying to come up with a theory of neo-iconoclasm. What does it mean to like
Mm.
destroy images in the era of
Hmm.
like the flood of images, like the excess of
Hmm.
signs we were talking about?
Yeah, well, no, that goes back to Trump. Like, Trump somehow has these images that are really difficult to destroy. They just have like that. Did you see the one that came out yesterday or the day before yesterday?
Yes,
With the
of
McDonald's and
course.
he's waving goodbye. He's wearing that apron. There's something just so like, you did it. And he did it. Like, you did it. How did you do it? And there's no, it's an image that breaks itself because it's breaking out of, and it's totally staged, but like somehow like it collapses on the stagedness. It goes so far beyond kayfabe. He's reached
Yeah.
this god tier of kayfabe.
Yeah, no, he's the master of it. I mean, the cinematic empire deserves its icon. That's
Yeah, we do
he's
deserve it.
he's a star. He's a star. It's like
He's an influencer
yeah,
extraordinaire.
absolutely.
So, but yeah, so iconoclasm. That was my first course at Evergreen College, actually, and then I ended up participating in iconoclasm of Evergreen.
Oh wow. So you were actually
Yeah,
studying this
the
concept?
phenomena. Yeah, we had like a 6 or 10 week course on it from we did icon making. We did the
Hmm.
arts aspect. We did the theory philosophy aspect, and then there was the narrative aspect of it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm fascinated by it, and like,
It's
yeah,
interesting
just
because, when in the height of the BLM riots, there was a
mm,
lot of iconoclasm going on and it was very political. But then I watch, just being aware that it's a process
mhm.
allows you to be a little bit more flexible in interpretation of it. Because if you're not flexible, then you go into friend-enemy distinction. You take it purely as, no, we have to guard our martyrs and our saints. And then you're like, well, what is the content of your saints? Why are American saints all politicians or lawyers? What does that tell us about us? Like, those are our saints. Those are the things that we want to protect. And I understand, like, there's a historical content, like in the South of America, with the Confederacy and stuff like that. So I understand that there's like these tensions, and that's why those icons are political, because they are about power and they are about identity and stuff. But if we can't see that all of our national identity is located in politicians and the myths surrounding these great men, that's different than a Christian society who would locate its icons, or even a monarchy that would have a certain sort of status assigned to a living individual as a living icon, and then having a relationship to that living icon that we've lost. We have a very difficult time like understanding or grokking monarchy because we see it all as tyranny. Embedded in us is this tyrannical.
Yeah, as opposed to like a symbolic, acknowledgement of, I don't know, like divine right of kings or the nature of hierarchy itself.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the most interesting iconoclastic moments, I think, is the French Revolution, because it actually ends up creating the museum, because they want to destroy all of these remnants of the old regime and the aristocracy, and but they realize that they can't destroy some of the stuff because it's like great works of art, but they don't know what to do with it. So they actually end up creating the Louvre and all these museums. So iconoclasm actually is very productive.
Because that was kind of the move because before then there were collections of art, but it was either the church or rich people. And so that was the creation of state sanction.
Exactly. So, and the museum basically extinguishes the symbolic power. So they end up describing religious objects as purely like good examples of craftsmanship.
Yeah.
Rather than this is the
or
mitre
historical
of...
curiosities.
Yeah. It's really interesting.
Yeah. There's a lot there. There's a lot there. Well, Nina, it's been great. I don't want to keep you too late. Always really fun talking to you. I didn't know what we were talking about. You're like, send me some things. I'm like, I have no idea. We just went through all these different topics. So I wonder what the audience is going to get out of this. But where can people find you, and what are they going to find when they get there?
I am only on Substack now. This is my sole and random podcasts and YouTube things. I write lots of weird poems and also occasionally notes, and I'm working on, and I write for The Spectator and The Telegraph and The Critic and like British publications. Like I said, I've written one piece for Ian Hersey about political disagreement. I'm hoping to write some more articles. That's it for now. So just Substack largely.
Very simple. Just a one-stop wonder.
Yeah. I mean, and not because I was chased off all the other platforms, honestly. I chose this.
Okay, yeah, self-exile. That's the most noble kind of exile.
The vol cell exile, the vol exile, the vol ostracism.
Yeah, okay. I can't. My mouth isn't going to make the pun, but the raptor or something. I don't know. I'm gonna wrap up the recording. Pleasure speaking with you. I'll have links to your work down there in the description. Peace. There we go. Thanks so much, kiddo.